Hello and welcome back. We're going to be talking about sketching today in this lesson. And sketching is really interesting. I mean, there's so many different ways we can use sketching for user experience design. One thing I really like to do is use it just for idea generation. And, we're going to learn about that. We're going to learn about the process. We're going to learn about sketching different types of flows and some tips in between. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with an intro to sketching. So sketching is a two-step process. It's very important to remember. Designers consider their options and then proceed to work out those details. That first step is called idea generation. And what we want to do here is we want to approach a new product and generate as many ideas as we can. It isn't uncommon for us to be missing certain ideas or elements or details, but it's just about getting ideas out there quickly. Doesn't matter. It isn't really focusing on the detail just at this moment. Generate as many approaches and then decide on which one is the most efficient for the task you're trying to solve for. The next step is adding detail and refinement. So step by step, you work on refining those sketches and then adding more detail. It's okay to kill some of your ideas here, and that's the point. So don't really get bogged down by all the messy sketches or the lack of detail. Just keep on going and refining, and it'll come over time. Now let's jump right into how we actually take a look at that process and we go from idea generation all the way to refinement. Now that first step is generating ideas like we just spoke about. Now these are the initial sketches you basically create, and they have lower level details. They have no colors usually, maybe some colors to signify key parts of the sketch, but the goal here is to draw a lot of basic sketches. You'll notice here that there's just like a square, an arrow, some text. At this point, like I said, just generating as many options as you possibly can. Don't get bogged down by those details. From here, we're going to start really kind of refining and start adding some details, and we can start making some sketch-like wireframes. And you'll notice that your promising sketches start to lead to more detailed view. And it may not have all the details still, and that's totally fine, but it will have a lot of the key details, and you want to refine those from those sketches that you had over here. So you'll notice that we start adding a little more elements and different types of UI elements up here, and down here, buttons, different types of inputs. This is when we're starting to think a little bit more about interaction. Now, it will feature a lot more detail flows as well, so we'll get into this soon, don't worry about that. The next step, so when I'm getting into visual design and start thinking much more about these wireframes in much more detail, I'm actually going to refine a lot of sketches and start to pull out certain elements that I think are really needed. So I'll start to realize that as I start building out these kind of components, I'm going to need buttons, I'm going to need different inputs, I'm going to need to account for different types of content. And that's really going to help us in the future when we're thinking about the different types of requirements that we need. That is the basic process from going from ideas all the way to components. Next, we're going to be talking about entire sketching process. Welcome back. We're going to talk about the sketching process in a little bit more detail. There's a couple different steps and steps within those steps that I want to talk about and touch upon so that when you start sketching, you're just ready. That first step is be prepared. Always be prepared. Prepare your tools beforehand. Lots of papers, pens, markers, pencils, whatever works for you, even if it's a tablet. We also want to think about what our goals are. You can think about what you're trying to solve for. Maybe it's a certain flow, maybe it's a certain interaction, but that should always be the center of your attention. We're also going to think about our audience. This is really important. If it's for yourself, go crazy. Be as messy as you want. You don't really need to annotate anything, as long as you understand your own process. But if it's for somebody like a client or a stakeholder or your teammates, you need to clean them up a bit, so maybe add a bit more detail and explain your thought process so you don't waste time trying to explain it while you're presenting it to them. Remember, always time box yourself. This is one of the best pieces of advice I ever got in my career, is to time box anything. Time box your sketching, presentations. Keep yourself under a time limit because it'll help you focus on sketching for your goal, and it'll put a little pressure on you to just throw out those ideas, not get bogged down by those details like we talked about earlier. So don't worry about them being messy. Just time box yourself, and I promise you'll just produce a bunch. Step 2. Now what you want to do here is just start. Just go. Draw a frame for your device. Is it a browser? Is it a desktop window? In this case right here, we have a little mobile frame. So it just needs to be a frame that's just going to help you kind of guide your sketch a bit. The next step is to think about the bigger picture and more basic elements. Elements that are much more redundant that you'll see. They'll really help you kind of frame your sketches, whether it's a footer, it's a header. Think about those elements that you're going to be seeing a lot of. And then from there, move on to some of the more detailed elements and the more detailed interactions. Have fun. Start sketching those interactions. Keep them very simple at this stage. All you need is 1 or 2 shapes. Squares, circles, rectangles. That can make up any sketch. You'll notice here that they're just using rectangles. We have circles. We have lines. They get their point across pretty well. Now, this is really important. This is one of my messy sketches. So I want you to just annotate and document your sketches. The worst thing is looking back and not understanding what you sketched before. You're going to be creating messy sketches, and sometimes you may not understand what you drew the day before or the week before whenever you revisit them. So the thing you need to do is just be as detailed as you can, but just quickly point out some certain reasoning or proposed interactions. Like over here I have some titles, I have some text explaining what the interaction is. It just really helps give a little bit more context to what you're drawing. Now, what I need you to do is just keep going. Find the sketches you like and start building alternatives from that. Don't just stop. Organize the ones that you think have the potential and keep on going. And what's going to really help you do that is by sharing them. Share those sketches, bring them to your product team to discuss. If you're working beside them, just tap them on the shoulder, set a meeting time, just get everyone in a room to just talk about certain things that you've been working on, whether it's an interaction, whether it's an overall flow. I like uploading my sketches into Figma sometimes, and I share that document with the team and people can comment. I also just bring printouts or originals. So if I'm sketching on paper, I'm just bringing my paper there, or if I'm sketching within like a tablet or something, I'm bringing that printout. What I'm doing is I'm just talking to everyone. It doesn't matter. Developers, product managers, QA, everyone has valuable insight that you should really tap into. And after you get some feedback, you can start building off of those sketches a bit more. This is an ongoing process for every type of feature that you're going to design. The last step is refining. So how do you clarify your sketches? So you have some sketches indicating some sort of flow or interaction, and you want to clean them up a bit, or think through them a bit more, but they're a bit messy and unorganized, and that's okay. So what do? Add titles. You really want to add titles for all your sketches. They really help you understand which screens are relevant, and without thinking too much about it. This is so useful if you have a bunch of sketches like we see here. And yes, annotate again. I know I mentioned this before, but here it is again. Annotations are like little notes right beside elements that explain its purpose. They also really help clarify certain things that are just too hard to draw. So it's really great. So like over here you can see that there's a bunch of different annotations in regards to the sketch and these different UI elements. But we also can use numbers. Try numbering your sketches. It can really help define where certain sketches within a flow or interaction. It helps speed up discussions, and it really helps others to try and make sense of where something fits in within your sketches. It also helps others to point out certain numbers when they're giving you some feedback. So they could just say, hey, Daniel, screen 3, I love it. We're going to keep that the same. And it really helps you gather that feedback as well if you're taking notes. Definitely use arrows. Arrows help to indicate a transition. So we can see here that if somebody interacts with this element, something else is going to happen and may push them in 2 different directions. Even though I don't necessarily understand this flow, I do know that something's happening here that's going to push them in 2 different directions. And that's with no context whatsoever. You can only imagine what somebody with context could see and the level of detail and context you can give them. So remember, use arrows. That can really help indicate where there's a page transition or even an interaction transition. And lastly, if you're feeling a little brave, you can start drawing some gestures for certain interactions. These are a bit hard, and there's a bunch of different ways you can kind of do this. You can try to use little circles. You can use arrows to indicate them. But what I usually do is I sketch really quickly, and I'm not really worried about like refining like these gesture sketches. What I'll do is I'll just go right over to the developer that I'm working with or developers and have a conversation. I mean, I run it by them and try to explain this in person, maybe even sketch on a whiteboard, and so they can really understand my intention and I can get some insight into what they think about the interaction. These are the different types of things you can do when you're thinking about the actual sketching process. Next, we're going to jump into actually sketching some UX flows. Hello and welcome back. We're going to be sketching some UX flows. You can tell that I'm on a tablet here because I just want to demonstrate how we can sketch those flows without using paper. A lot of people like to use tablets, and I'm using an application called Concepts. It's a free application. You can pay for some additional features, but I'm not paying right now, and I can just like draw. I can export this as a JPEG and send it to myself if I need it, and that's all we really need for sketching. So I totally recommend it if you want to go the digital route. You can even do it in Figma. And yeah, so I mean, you can just grab your pen. You can even change the size of it if you want to get a little more thick there. If you double tap with 2 fingers, you'll just go back. This is your eraser. So for the sake of this video, I'm gonna keep it pretty. I think that's good. Also, you can select different types of pens. So what we'll do is, right now we're using the regular pen. There's the fixed width pen. That's something that I rather use just for actually drawing the wireframes. So let's bring that down. I think that's it's a little too thick. Okay, perfect. Now we're ready to go. Here we're going to be focusing on a user's experience through certain journeys, both big and small. Before we even jump into those types of journeys, I just want to give you a little understanding of what I'm asking myself every time I approach something like this. Step 1, I want to understand what I need to draw. So I got to figure out exactly what I'm thinking of sketching. Do I want to sketch a large journey, or am I thinking about a small interaction? Step 2 is defining some sort of starting point. You can start at the beginning of a journey, or in the middle, or at the end. You choose what you think is best. Typically, I like to start thinking about the most difficult or riskiest parts of the product first. Some people actually like to start at the end and work their way backwards to figure out how users get to a certain point. Like I said, it's whatever works for you. Step 3, decide your next steps. After you define that first starting point within your flow, you need to know where to go. Well, that is up to you, and you need to ask yourself some important questions. Which way does this step lead our users? Where do you want them to go? What does the user need to do to get there? In the end, when I'm thinking about alternate scenarios or alternate flows that I'm trying to sketch, I think about all the different questions in terms of alternative ways that a person can go through a certain route. So what options do they have? What happens if the user closes the app at this point? Where will they resume? So these are the types of questions I'm always asking myself every time I approach a sketch. So let's start with our very first sketch. We're going to talk about mapping overall flow. Think about a user's journey through the product. That's like from point A all the way to point B. We want to understand when they come in and when they leave and what that experience is like. It's like creating some sort of customer journey, and here we can really outline different types of pain points when they're feeling happy through this journey, when they're feeling sad, and pick out different types of opportunities where we can really improve that experience for them. And also understand where exactly we can branch out and focus on different types of flows. Let's start sketching a general journey. It doesn't need to be neat. It needs to be just a little, you need to be able to understand it. We're going to start sketching a flow here. The first one I'm thinking about is mapping the overall journey for our client habitual. So if I think about step 1, I'm just going to put 1, I'm going to draw a frame. And we're not really focusing on UI elements here or anything like that. I just want to think about what the user is possibly seeing, what screens they possibly are going to, and what they're expecting. So when they come to our application, they may see a welcome screen. and like some sort of button. Maybe it's an onboarding process. We can figure that out later, but now like we've kind of established that. Step 2, let's create another frame. Maybe the user, when they come here, they're thinking about searching right away. They want to find a product. That's why they would use something like a visual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw like maybe home screen. That looks like a cube. That still looks like a cube. That's fine. We're going to just draw like some boxes. Okay, so they come to this home screen, and what they're going to do is they're going to search for a product. And the next step is that they're going to actually find that product. So they find their product and they go and research those details. And from here, after they've done that, they're interested in actually purchasing it. But right now, you'll notice that this is a very happy flow. This is like what we really want our users to do every single time they come into our product. And that's not always the case. So they'll probably see like a cart with a little X. Maybe there's like a checkout button. There are details of whatever they're purchasing, whatever product they want to buy. And if we move that over, okay, a little messy, but that's okay. I mean, we're getting a general sense of what this journey is looking like. And they get some sort of confirmation that the package has shipped. That you bought it and it's right out the door. And then I don't think the journey really ends there. We need to think about what happens after it's shipped. In this scenario, it's delivered and the user is happy. So this is what our whole flow starts to look like. User comes in and is welcomed by us. They search for a product. They find that product and review it, add it to their cart and check it out. The package ships and it is delivered to them and everyone is happy. Now that always doesn't happen, and this is where I'm asking myself, well, we asked ourselves the question of what the goal was. The goal was to sketch the whole journey. We thought about what steps come next, but we didn't really think of alternate scenarios. So what happens if they can't find their product? There's a scenario there. If they can't find their product, maybe they have to go through some category searches. So they start searching based off of categories, or they start maybe reading reviews. There's different things that we need to always take into account. Not very rarely, and this is an assumption, and we always try to validate our assumption, but my assumption is that very rarely that everyone goes through the same exact flow. Maybe they want to read reviews. So we're starting to think about all the different types of scenarios that a user may experience in their journey. Maybe over here, they're happy, so we can give them a good onboarding experience. And over here, when they're searching, maybe they're a little confused, and maybe this is a great way to implement a really easy search experience that makes them happy. Oops. So maybe we can really capitalize on that opportunity. We really need to think about who our users are and what they really want to experience when they're moving through our app. So that's how you map an overall flow using sketching. And if you wanted to, like I said before, you can just export this, bring it into Figma, clean it up a bit, and start thinking about it there if you want to. But that's how you map an overall flow. Welcome back, and we're going to jump right into sketching more flows. This time, we're going to focus on screen flows. Now here you should really focus on a user's actions through a specific flow. It could be a small sequence of screens, or it could be a journey that branches. So let's think about our client again. This could be a user who actually searches for a product. So let's get in there. So I'm just gonna title this. I mean, it's really hard to kind of draw on this tablet, but I'm not gonna really title everything. We can just say like, search, zoom out, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna just draw a frame here. Perfect. Once again, not really worrying about the details here, but we're gonna just focus on how does a user complete this flow properly? How do they achieve their goal of finding a product? What I'm going to do is I think, they'll come to the home page and they may access our search bar. There may be a navigation. I'm not sure what those navigation items are just yet, but this is what the makeup of the page is thus far. After they interact with that, The next sequence is a user sees results. So pardon my messiness, but that's okay. So they'll see some results, and over here we'll have some images. I know that there's going to be some sort of content here, and this is going to really help me start building some sort of requirements that I need to account for when I'm designing elements. So like I know that there's these cards that have an image, they have some text. I'm not sure what that text is. It could be a product name, it could be a combination of that plus price plus other elements. But I do know that when they do click over here in this area, we're going to move over. Step 3 would probably be something like a product description. So we'll just write item. So, I mean, you don't need to copy exactly what I'm doing. I really urge you to think outside the box, take some time to just sketch out. I mean, you can use a tablet, whatever really works for you. The item description, I'm starting to really think about some of the content that's going there. It could be like a name. Let's get in there and start writing a little bit of content. Price could be over here. There could be like options to change color. I'm not sure exactly, but there's some text. And then maybe there's like a button sticky to the bottom that says like add to cart. Just double tap with 2 fingers in concept and you'll be able to actually just go back. So if I go like this, double tap, perfect. Next step, they've clicked that button, they've added that to their cart. Step 4. Actually, you know what? If they add that to the cart, they found the item, they'll probably just go to the cart and, we'll end the flow right here. I think we can actually start thinking about alternate scenarios. So they've added their item to a cart. Perfect. And maybe there's a checkout button over there. Another interesting thing is we start thinking about different things like hierarchy. So if navigation's sticky to the bottom, maybe we start using that for primary buttons and start sticking other things to the top, which are a little bit more harder to access on mobile. Just different things we're starting to think about in terms of like page hierarchy. It's really going to help us influence like ways we start building sitemaps and actually start building that page hierarchy. Let's think about different alternate flow. What we know here is that we made the assumption that they're going to come in and they're going to click that search bar. But there's other ways to actually find a product. And this is where we can start thinking about other ways to make this process a little bit easier. So we'll label this 1 and we'll just call this home. But what happens if we really think about like placing products strategically there? Products for our user. So we do know that the application that we are building is for a personalized shopping experience, like a really personalized shopping experience based off of their habits, based off of their interests. And we can really push items at the front and really hope that these users will go down that funnel instead of actually just searching. We want to make this experience much more enjoyable and more catered to them. So we could really like take advantage of that. So we'll start thinking about, maybe there are images here of products that they could like, or products based off of their interests, products that maybe they're in their wish list and are on sale. So we start thinking about these different types of scenarios. Looks like an F. I just fixed that. So if they do come to the home screen, they could actually tap on one of these products here. And if they do, the next step in their flow would be to actually go for the item description page that we actually built over here. So we start thinking about all those different scenarios, and look at that. We already kind of came up with a little user flow and an optional user flow. We should always think about more than one scenario when we're building something like this, because there always is more than one scenario and one route to get to a certain page or reach a certain goal. This is really going to help influence our page hierarchies, like I mentioned before, and sitemaps. That's how you draw screen flows.